In natural mammoth remains, nearly 2 out of every 3 identified animals are male. But at Ice Age sites tied to humans, that ratio turns almost completely around. There, ancient DNA shows that roughly 70% of the mammoths were female. The reversal is too consistent to ignore, yet it does not reveal the hunter's intentions. Were people deliberately choosing females, or repeatedly encountering female-led family herds? Imagine a human group watching mammoths cross a frozen valley 25,000 years ago. A solitary bull promises more meat, but his trail could disappear beyond the horizon. The family herd is already approaching a narrow route the humans recognize. Their choice may depend less on strength than on knowing where animals will be. The bones preserve the outcome of choices like this, but not the thoughts behind them. In 2026, researchers compared genome-wide data from 521 woolly mammoths. 100 came from 11 bone accumulations associated with Upper Paleolithic people. The other 421 came from dispersed natural settings across Eurasia and North America. In those natural settings, approximately 66% of the mammoths were male. In the human-associated accumulations, approximately 70% were female. The female bias appeared across multiple sites rather than inside one spectacular deposit. Earlier genetic work had already found that naturally preserved mammoths were strongly male-biased. Solitary males may have entered gullies, mud, thin ice, or other natural traps more often. Human-associated deposits therefore preserve the opposite demographic signal from natural deposits. The comparison strongly supports human activity as a major force behind those accumulations. But the word targeted sounds more precise than the surviving evidence truly is. Some mammoths were hunted, others may have been scavenged, transported, or represented only by ivory. The mystery is not whether the pattern exists, but which repeated behavior created it. Before explaining the female bias, we need proof that humans sometimes attacked living mammoths. One of the clearest cases comes from Kraków Spadzista in southern Poland. This late Gravetian site dates to roughly 25,000 years ago. It preserves the remains of more than 100 mammoths alongside human activity. Most important, a flint projectile fragment was discovered embedded in a mammoth rib. Other backed stone implements carry impact where consistent with components of hunting weapons. Those finds make direct attack difficult to dismiss at this particular site. Mammoth carcasses were also processed there, connecting hunting with butchery and resource use. Yet the accumulation did not necessarily form during one enormous mass kill. Evidence points instead toward repeated events, human activity, and later changes to the deposit. This matters because a demographic bias can grow through repetition, one encounter at a time. Hunters did not need a formal rule if certain opportunities kept producing better results. Kraków Spadzista proves active hunting, but it cannot reconstruct every choice made there. It anchors the story in real projectile evidence before we examine the wider pattern. The next question is how a fragment of bone can reveal whether its owner was male or female. The shape of an isolated mammoth bone often cannot reveal biological sex reliably. Ancient DNA offers another route, even when only a small fragment survives. Researchers compare sequence coverage from the X chromosome with coverage from other chromosomes. That relationship usually separates genetically female specimens from genetically male specimens. The method can reopen museum collections assembled decades before ancient DNA laboratories existed. It is more reliable than guessing sex from tusk size or incomplete skeletal proportions. But genetic sex cannot tell us how the animal died or who moved its bones. Archaeologists still need tools: cut marks, impact damage, dating, and site formation. That is why the 2026 study compared many contexts instead of trusting one dramatic skeleton. DNA reveals the demographic pattern, archaeology must explain the human behavior behind it. No one can watch a living woolly mammoth herd, so every behavioral reconstruction has limits. Researchers cautiously compare mammoth evidence with the social lives of modern elephants. Elephant females usually remain in family groups containing related females and their young. Experienced older females can guide those groups through changing landscapes and seasons. Males generally leave their natal families as they approach maturity. Adult bulls may travel alone or form looser associations with other males. Fossil and genetic evidence suggests mammoths may have shared this broad social pattern. A mammoth family likely contained several females and juveniles of different ages. It was not a collection of isolated, interchangeable animals moving without social memory. Several adults could defend the young, making a family herd extremely dangerous to approach. So females were not automatically easy prey simply because the largest bulls were bigger. Yet social cohesion may also have made family movement more regular and visible. Water, forage, shelter, and seasonal conditions can channel animals through familiar places. Modern female elephant groups often use stable ranges more consistently than roaming adult males. If mammoths behaved similarly, family herds may have been easier to relocate. A hunter did not need the modern concept of matriarchy to recognize that pattern. The group only needed to remember where particular tracks appeared in particular seasons. That memory could pass between generations without maps, writing, or genetic statistics. Repeated knowledge could eventually create a female-biased archaeological pattern. Availability can look like preference when the same kind of encounter keeps happening. Adult female mammoths were generally smaller than the largest mature bulls. But smaller is a relative word when the animal still outweighs every human nearby. Size may have influenced decisions without being the complete explanation. A female inside a defensive family group could be harder to approach than a solitary male. Juveniles may have affected how tightly the group stayed together when threatened. That possibility is plausible, but no bone preserves the herd's reaction as a recorded event. Modern elephants provide an analogy, not a perfect behavioral script for mammoths. Terrain may therefore have mattered more than a simple comparison of male and female size. Mud, broken ground, steep slopes, and bottlenecks could restrict a mammoth's movement. Wind direction, visibility, snow, and escape routes could decide whether an approach was possible. Prepared projectile weapons allowed people to attack without standing directly beneath the animal. Even so, every attempt carried the risk of injury, wasted energy, and lost tools. A failed hunt was expensive precisely when cold conditions made calories most valuable. Predictable encounters allowed people to prepare weapons and coordinate more carefully. A familiar valley might provide more advantage than a sharper point used in open ground. But specific cliff drives or bog traps must be demonstrated separately at each site. We should not transform every bone accumulation into one cinematic mass kill event. Some deposits formed through many episodes of hunting, scavenging, transport, and natural change. The broad female bias could therefore emerge through several mechanisms working together. A second genetic case shows why no single explanation is yet sufficient. Hohle Fels is a cave in southwestern Germany with a remarkable Upper Paleolithic record. Its layers preserve mammoth ivory working, animal remains, tools, art, and repeated human occupation. In 2026, researchers recovered ancient DNA from archaeological mammoth ivory found there. They combined 8 newly sexed pieces with 7 previously studied mammoth specimens. The combined result contained 11 females and 4 males, nearly a 3-to-1 ratio. That direction resembles the broader female bias seen at human-associated accumulations. But 15 individuals remain a small sample, especially across a long span of time. Hohle Fels alone cannot establish a universal strategy for every Paleolithic community. Female-leaning signals appeared in both ivory and bone rather than only one material category. That makes simple artifact selection less likely to explain the entire pattern. Yet an ivory object does not automatically prove that its mammoth was hunted locally. Tusks could be collected from carcasses, moved between camps, or exchanged across distances. Researchers therefore describe several possibilities rather than one final answer. People may have procured animals from female-heavy family herds for food and raw material. They may also have selected particular tusks after the animals were already dead. Or the archaeological sample may partly reflect the ordinary composition of accessible herds. Hohle Fels is valuable because it repeats the signal while preserving its uncertainties. Independent clues become stronger when their limitations do not all point in the same direction. The cave supports female-biased exploitation, but not conscious selection by sex. Another Arctic site reveals how selective mammoth use could vary for completely different reasons. At Yana in Arctic Siberia, archaeological evidence also shows that humans attacked mammoths. Projectile fragments were recovered from mammoth shoulder and pelvic bones. Recently obtained body parts in cultural layers further connect humans with fresh carcasses. The represented mammoths also fall within a comparatively narrow range of body sizes. Researchers interpreted this as selective exploitation rather than a random sample of mortality. They also argued that mammoth hunting there was probably sporadic rather than constant. Ivory may have been one important reason for taking or processing particular mammoths. Yana does not independently prove the broad female bias found by the 2026 study. Instead, it shows that prehistoric selection could follow local economic needs. Meat may dominate one decision, while ivory or hide matters more somewhere else. Season, distance, group size, technology, and alternative prey changed the calculation. No single mammoth hunting recipe remained unchanged across thousands of years and many regions. That flexibility makes the continental female pattern more intriguing, not less important. Different choices repeatedly arrived at a similar female-heavy archaeological outcome. To understand why, we must consider everything a mammoth offered after the encounter. A mammoth was not simply prey, it was an enormous concentration of food and material. Meat and fat could provide valuable energy in a cold and demanding environment. Hide could become covering, while bones and ivory could become durable objects and tools. Large mammoth bones also entered structures at some upper Paleolithic settlements. But obtaining the animal was only the beginning of a much larger logistical problem. Processing required cutting tools, time, knowledge, carriers, storage, and coordinated labor. No lone heroic hunter could transform several tons of animal into usable resources. The entire group had to organize what could be used, moved, shared, or left behind. Predictable mammoth movement could therefore support planning long before any attack occurred. Tools could be prepared and labor organized if people expected a herd to return. Human movement may even have followed mammoth movement across parts of the seasonal landscape. Mammoths followed forage, water, weather, and social needs that people could observe. Humans learned those patterns because failure meant lost energy and greater danger. The most valuable mammoth may have been the one a community could reliably encounter. That brings us to 4 explanations for why female remains became so common. The first explanation is body size. Females were smaller than the largest adult bulls. That might reduce some risk, but several adult females could defend a family together. Size alone therefore cannot explain the strength or persistence of the genetic pattern. The second explanation is herd selection rather than deliberate selection of individual females. A family group naturally contained many females, juveniles, and relatively few mature males. Repeated exploitation of herds would create a female-heavy outcome without counting sex first. The third explanation is predictability across routes, seasons, and familiar terrain. Family groups may have returned to resources more regularly than widely roaming bulls. People could revisit the same crossing and repeatedly meet the same social category. Over centuries, predictable access could create what later looks like a conscious preference. The fourth explanation is opportunity. Hunting, scavenging, transport, and material selection mixed together. A female carcass discovered naturally could supply ivory without any hunting decision at all. Some sites may preserve attacks, others may preserve collected tusks or complex mixed histories. Smaller size, herd structure, predictable movement, and opportunity could reinforce one another. The evidence is strongest for the female-biased result and weaker for any single motive. That difference protects the story from turning an intriguing pattern into a false certainty. The safest conclusion is female-biased human exploitation, not one universal hunting rule. Future DNA, age profiles, isotopes, and taphonomy may separate these mechanisms more clearly. Until then, the uncertainty is not a weakness, it is the heart of the discovery. A female-biased pattern raises an unavoidable question about mammoth population decline. Mammoths matured slowly and invested substantial time in relatively few offspring. Repeated removal of breeding females could therefore carry unusually high demographic costs. That effect might be strongest in populations already reduced by environmental stress. But the new genetic pattern does not prove that female hunting caused mammoth extinction. Mammoth habitats changed dramatically as the last ice age ended. Climate, vegetation, population size, isolation, and human pressure could interact differently by region. Mammoth populations disappeared at different times rather than during one synchronized event. A small population might be vulnerable to losses that a larger population could absorb. Archaeology rarely provides the population accounting required to measure that effect precisely. Woolly mammoths even survived on Wrangel Island until roughly 4,000 years ago. That long survival warns against reducing their extinction to one simple global explanation. Female-biased exploitation changes the debate, but it does not close it. It shows that human decisions intersected with mammoth social biology at population scale. To understand those decisions, We return to the valley where the story began. The people know nothing of chromosomes, sample sizes, or statistical significance. They know tracks, wind, seasons, distance, and how this valley channels movement. The elder remembers seeing a similar family cross here during an earlier season. Beyond the ridge, the larger bull's trail points into a landscape without certainty. Following him could consume days and still end with an empty return to camp. The family herd is already present, but several adults protect the young. It is not an easy target, it is a known opportunity with known dangers. The humans wait rather than charge, studying where the animals slow and turn. Perhaps they act later, perhaps they withdraw, or perhaps they find a carcass elsewhere. No surviving bone can recover the exact decision made beside this particular fire. Across many sites, however, decisions like these produced a measurable female-heavy result. The result does not require a spoken rule instructing hunters to choose females. It may require only repeated access to family groups moving through predictable places. Smaller body size may have helped, while herd defense kept every encounter dangerous. Juveniles, season, terrain, resource needs, and scavenging could alter each individual event. Ancient DNA has transformed silent fragments into a population-level clue about human behavior. It reveals what repeatedly happened without pretending to know every reason why. Survival may have depended less on brute force than on observing another species carefully. The most successful hunters may have been those who remembered where opportunity returned. Which mattered most, smaller size, family herds, predictable routes, or repeated opportunity? The bones give us the pattern, the next discovery may finally reveal the choice.